If you wanted to play Pokemon on the go, in the present day, you would have to bring a Nintendo Switch. If you wanted to play Pokemon on the go 10 years ago, we would have to bring our Nintendo 3DS. Okay, so I guess you've always been able to play Pokemon on the go. But okay, let's say you don't bring your gaming console with you. How are you going to play Pokemon? Oh, well, shit. Well, let's pretend it's 2010 and you have Heartgold and Soulsilver and you wanted to take Pokemon on the go, and for whatever reason, you couldn't bring your Nintendo? Well, good thing most copies of the game came with the magnificent Pokewalker. So, in 2010, Pokemon released Pokemon Heartgold and Soulsilver for the Nintendo DS, the very next iteration of Pokemon remakes. And as part of the development of the games, the developers wanted to create an accessory that was an innovative way to encourage players to move more while expanding the experience that they would have with Pokemon. Remember, this is like less than a year before the Nintendo 3DS, where for some reason Nintendo was obsessed with you wanting to go out and specifically walk. But above all, it was an accessory to expand the experiences in Heartgold and Soulsilver. And to not let it hog the spotlight, I'll keep it brief, but the games were received pretty well. Dare I say, I think they're the best Pokemon remakes, and realistically, the only competition it has is my bias with the Mega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but part of the success and the legacy of the remakes have been the experiences people have with the Pokewalker. Pokewalkers were kind of a mix of Tamagotchi and pedometers that serve as an extension to Pokemon Heartgold and Soulsilver. It was in the shape of a Pokeball, and it was smaller than the size of an average palm on anyone's hand, and it allowed you to basically have a very limited but honestly fun Pokemon experience. Your experience was based on the amounts of watts you had, the currency used in the silly little machine. For every 20 steps, you earned a watt, and depending how many you had, depended the area you could visit in the Pokewalker. And it could have ranged from 50 watts, so like around 1,000 steps, to the most difficult ones to get, 100,000 watts, which is a total of 2 million steps. So if you wanted everything in here, it would have been a good idea to sign up for an activity that involved a lot of running and walking. But it was all for a good cause. All depending the amount of watts you had, you were able to collect items, fight, and catch Pokemon, which came in useful, especially if you wanted to catch Pokemon much earlier than usual, or Pokemon that were just exclusive to the Pokewalker. The Pokemon you would send to the Pokewalker was able to level up, but only one level per Pokewalker session. Oh yeah, because your Pokemon came back from Heartgold Soulsilver, and then they would come back and forth. But despite being just an extension of the main game, the Pokewalker genuinely was a masterpiece of an extension. Because while the traditional Pokemon experiences featured in the little thingy were very limited and reduced, it was still packed with a lot of content. Yeah, a lot of it depended on how many steps you took, but the amount of content that would vary was so diverse that it did motivate you to go on a walk. Let's take a journey on one of the many areas in the Pokewalker. The Noisy Forest, a large natural forest that has been allowed to grow, where many Pokemon live deep in the forest. Look at those trees. Don't they look inviting? Alright, let's see the arrangement of things we can find here. Item-wise, there's a total of 10 items that you can get. And look at that. Sure, you've got items that you can just regularly get, but look at that! A cherry and a Pecha Berry? My. And Pokemon-wise, there's a range from 6 Pokemon, from the somewhat common Oddish to the much later game of Wobbuffet, all basically available if you walked 4,000 steps. So one little trip by taking a long walk, playing a little in your Pokewalker, and you're coming back to your Heartgold and Soulsilver game with a rare Pokemon and useful items, and playing in your Pokewalker was honestly so much fun. Like, genuinely. And it's such a shame that it was just a one-time thing. Granted, yeah, it did inflate the prices of the games with the Pokewalker bundle. I cannot imagine the price of that in today's economy. But it was a well-made little device that was praised by people, to the point that it's even remembered to this day. And yet, we haven't gotten anything since. Sure, there was Pokemon Go and the Let's Go extensions, but they literally were just pedometers. Nothing wrong with that, but Pokemon had already struck gold with the Pokewalker. Personally, I would have loved to see a phone app that resembled the Pokewalker that could potentially work with the present day games. You don't need to make it all high-tech, microtransactions, and fancy-schmancy online stuff. God forbid we have a phone app that doesn't need the internet to fully work. The Pokewalker literally was just a tiny thing that featured 2D sprites in grayscale. You could use the Pokemon menu's smaller icons, and from there implement the Pokewalker mechanics. They could take it a step further and add something like the Pokemon Refresh games, where you can feed your Pokemon and pet them and stuff. Very much like a Tamagotchi. It's an extension to Pokemon games. It doesn't need to be a whole thing, but it also shouldn't be treated like it's nothing. The Pokewalker was such a success, it's still a thing people talk about to this day. Usually when something doesn't matter as much, it kind of fades in people's memories. But despite being just a one-off optional extension to the Johto remakes, it left such an impact on people, it definitely means that the Pokemon team did a good thing. I just miss the very 2000s aesthetic and gameplay of it. Sure, nowadays it may be seen as perhaps simplistic, but I would personally play the hell out of it. It looks to be the perfect size for an Apple Watch. I mean, in a way, I guess you could call it Pokemon Go's older sibling. So yeah, honestly, I just wanted to talk about the Pokewalker. It was such a key thing in my childhood, and I hope I get to see it recreated some way in the future. Because there are more chances of that happening than finding my old Pokewalker in the fucking mess that is the house that I live in.